course, cannabis is like, oh, you really like me? Well, let me give you more of this trait so you like me even more. He was talking about how he was starting to get a little paranoid, and he's been smoking for about 50 years or so. And then he came to this epiphany that you can never be too high. And then, we all heard about Delta 9 and Delta 8 and all of that. So,
what's your opinion on those? And before we begin, I wanted to just read a few lines to kind of help set the tone for today from your book, Plant Songs. And it's your dedication. To the earth, to the water, to the mother vine, and to every plant and fungus, I offer you these words for all your nourishment, inspiration, and wisdom. And I'd like to just bring that in as kind of a prayer for our connection here today as well.
Thank you. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny, I haven't read that in a long time. So it's always good to hear it reflected back.
Well, you're very well-spoken, and I really like the way that you write as well. It's easy to read your book. I didn't read all of your book, but I think your book, for what I did read, I found it very easy and enjoyable to read. And I was wondering, are you thinking of doing an audiobook of that?
I have thought about doing an audiobook, and I want to do a second edition with more recipes and maybe a couple more herbs too.
In your book, you write, "Nature heals. I have been healed by trees, herbs, and by the sea. The earth has always provided and will continue to do so if we just listen." I wonder what listening to nature, to plants, looks like in your life today, and where someone might start that is new in their journey of connecting back into nature.
So it's really simple. I feel like we do a really good job at making things complicated or feeling like we have to have these very specific rituals to tap in or to drop in. And for me, listening to nature really just means taking a walk, whether that's in your neighborhood that has trees or in an old growth forest. And, leave the headphones and the phone in the car if you don't feel, a lot of people aren't comfortable now without their phones. So if you just at least don't have music on or your earbuds in and listen. And don't try to think too hard about what you feel like you need to listen to or what you need to hear. And really what you're going to hear is birds chirping. You're going to hear the wind blowing through the trees. You're going to hear your feet on the ground, on the grass, whether it's leaves crunching or, soft grass under your feet. And that's it. Just listen. You don't have to get any profound, sacred information out of it. A lot of times it just brings a sense of peace to slow down and listen and get out of your head a little bit.
And how often would you recommend that?
If you can do it every day, that would be great. 15 minutes a day. If you have the privilege of doing an hour a day or 2 30-minute sessions, one in the morning and then one at the end of your day to ground yourself after, work or school or whatever you've been doing. Little increments really do make a huge difference.
And you work with clients and suggest this to them. What type of benefits do you see people experience after maybe a week, a month?
Usually they just say they are surprised that they have a lowered stress response. So whereas normally something would make them really anxious or angry, after taking a 5, 10, 15-minute walk, they notice that their entire nervous system just feels calmer. They also notice that they feel more connection with themselves because they took that time of not just trying to accomplish things because we're such doers. And so they kind of get a new perspective on the importance of just being and not having to do something all the time. And then less physical pain, better sleep. For those who maybe did want it to tone up or lose weight, it was a catalyst for them to have more movement in their life. People that were depressed feel like they have more joy because they've stopped getting, so much of depression is us going inward and forgetting how to communicate with the outside world, and our biggest outside world being nature And so they really do feel a deeper connection with themselves once they open up to filling that with the natural environment.
So I'm from Chicago, and I was just back there last weekend, and much of my family lives downtown Chicago. I used to live in the city. I lived in, are you familiar with Chicago?
Not at all.
Okay, well, there's the north side of Chicago, there's a big free zoo called the Lincoln Park Zoo. I lived right by that. That was like the most nature part of the city. But where my brother lives in the South Loop by Sears Tower, which is our tallest building, I'm like, where is the nature? Where can I go and find some nature? And these people are living here. I'm just visiting for the weekend, and they're there like all the time. My brother lives on the 12th or 16th floor, just stacked with people. How could somebody that's living in like a densely populated city, how can they find their way into nature if they don't really have parks or access to things like that?
Most cities at least do have some tree-lined streets. And so to me, that is nature. If you have trees, even if they're covered, if it's a concrete jungle all around it, that still counts. You'll still hear bird song. You'll still have pollinators if it is a flowering tree. And then a lot of people do have, little micro gardens outside of their homes. Mm-hmm. So they may have culinary herbs on their deck or on their patio or in their windowsill. Those are easy ways to also connect with nature. And then you have something that you can then add to your food. So you get that like second step of maybe you grew a rosemary in your windowsill and then you used it in the Italian food you ate, or so it's really simple. Again, little small things make all the difference. And usually in cities, you can find a rose garden or a botanic garden. Like Denver has this incredible botanic garden. I'm sure Chicago does too. Mm-hmm. And so
it's well outside of the city,
okay,
unfortunately.
It's not in the city.
What the city has is they've got the lakefront. So they're on Lake Michigan. And so that's beautiful. That's where I would typically go, is out to the lake. It's like an ocean. You can't see the other side of it.
Oh, nice. Mm-hmm. So good. You can get that expansiveness of nature without having to go too far.
Hey, I just wanted to jump in here and give a quick shout out to the sponsor of today's podcast, B Micro, the easiest way to sneak vegetables into any meal. Due to soil depletion, GMOs, and monocropping, Americans are not getting enough nutrients. So in 2018, I founded B Micro, the first freeze-dried microgreens company in the U.S. to help Americans get more concentrated natural nutrients into their diet. Microgreens are a phase in the plant's life when they're 14 days old and naturally the most concentrated in vitamins, minerals, nutrients, all the good things that we need. Our microgreens are grown here in the U.S. in soil in a greenhouse. They're certified USDA organic and regenerative organic. We grow, wash, and freeze dry them to extend their 1-week shelf life to over 1 year, allowing us to ship anywhere in the U.S. without the worry of spoilage. We have 2 flavors, broccoli, backed by over 2,000 studies on sulforaphane and its powerful detox benefits, and a blend of red cabbage, radish, and broccoli, the most potent detox formula we've tested, offering you the most bang for your buck. Easily sneak these microgreens in any meal. Eggs, smoothies, pizza, pasta, even your kids' mac and cheese, you can't even taste it. Use code STEVE15 to save at bmicro.farm.
What would the next level look like? Okay, so you're taking a walk in nature. Someone's done that now for a month. They're feeling pretty good. Is there a way that they can start to put more intention into their connection with nature? Can they ask for it to communicate in a certain way? Can they start to communicate with it? Can they bring an offering, a prayer, a song?
Yeah, any and all of the above. I don't think at least I'm not much of somebody with rules. There's definitely respect that needs to go along with it. But I find when I am not actively listening and to try to pull information out from nature, it tends to be quiet. But when I am just in a passive state and I'm just, in the moment or in the flow, that's when I notice nature starts speaking. A lot of times I'll hear it in the wind. So that could be something that you start bringing more attention to after you have been out, doing your nature walk for a month or so. You can stop and kneel on the ground. You can sing a song. You can offer food, as long as it's biodegradable, and you bury it, because you don't want a bunch of critters in there, but you could always offer whatever your local food is. So let's say it's raspberry season, and in Colorado, wild raspberries grow everywhere. You could pick a couple of raspberries, You could sit under a tree and offer the raspberries to the tree. You can always offer tobacco. You can offer other herbs, dried or fresh herbs. You can also just offer a thank you, whether you say it out loud or it's just in your mind's eye. As long as you have a moment where there is intention and respect, I think that's enough. And it really is just listening and then not discounting what you hear. Because so often, we'll hear something like smile more. Or one that I recently got was sing more. So, and it's like, well, where did that voice come from? And I'm like, I heard it on the breeze. And that sounds, interesting to some people and too far out for others. But I think if we just listen without expectation of what we're going to receive, then, it's always there. It's the same with prayer. People pray and sometimes they hear nothing and they may just feel better afterwards. And sometimes they do hear a voice of guidance. And I definitely believe that this comes from, at least for me, I've heard it come from nature a lot.
Would you say that's the number one way that God communicates to us is through intuition, through these voices, ideas that just seem to land in our mind?
I'm not a theologian, but I would say for me personally, yes. And, God being, omnipresent and without gender and without form and, all the things. So I always have to throw the goddess in there, gods and goddesses and all the entities and beings, right? Because we have these forest entities as well.
Of course.
So God being the generic word for God, then absolutely. And that also puts us as, stewards of this land and not dominators, which I think when you don't go into a situation with nature thinking there's a hierarchy and you deserve this knowledge, then once again, more of that information comes.
Yeah, I find when I make an offering, come from a respectful place, and show up frequently, that's when the intuition and nature reveals itself more. If I were to just pick the raspberries and just be like, these are mine, I could just take them, I might get a fraction of the medicine or the knowing or the understanding or the benefit. But if I were to ask them and make an offering of tobacco or water or something, or a local biodegradable food, then there's a contract, and in that contract it can then give more of itself to me.
Absolutely. And it misses you when you're away. Once you do have a presence on a specific piece of land where you are listening and paying attention and, giving reverence, then it misses you when you're not there. And it's like, oh, where have you been? Not that it relies on us to be there, but it does. I've felt it's like a welcoming. It's always happy when you're back.
So I have heard that there is a hierarchy of humans are above the plants. The plants are in some ways to serve us and to help support us. It also feels when sitting with these plants in more ceremonial type ways, it's just like I feel like the plant is way above me, where the plant is like this is the wisest, most clever and loving, and just thousands of years of lifetimes of wisdom. How do you think of the human-plant relationship?
Well, I definitely think they've been here a lot longer than we have. They are our elders and our teachers, and they are sources of, medicine and food and ceremony and magic and, healing. And, I don't know if hierarchy is the right word, but I do believe that they, at least in where we are at evolutionary right now, they definitely are smarter and have more information that we need to glean from them than that they need to glean from us, But I do think there's a reciprocity, but I definitely don't think we're on top, nor should we ever want to be. And just as a weird aside of where people say plants are here for us and our purpose, if we look at, inulin, which is high in dandelion root and Jerusalem artichoke and other root vegetables, burdock, things like that, inulin is produced in the plant as a plant starch for their energy. And then when we eat those foods, the inulin is food for our bacteria in our gut. So inulin isn't for humans at all, but we benefit from high inulin plants. But the inulin is there for the plant energy, and the inulin is there for our gut bacteria, but not for humans at all. So plants definitely aren't just here for our benefit or for us. They are here for themselves and for the rest of nature as well.
So I sell a product made out of microgreens, and microgreens are a phase in the plant's life when they're the most nutrient dense in vitamins, minerals, antioxidants. What are those things to the plant? Why does the plant have those good things in them?
Gosh, you're asking me questions I don't know about, but I do know that. Actually, I don't have a good answer for that.
My understanding is they're like the gears for the plant. They help it to grow. As the plant grows, it is mostly just fiber and water. But those vitamins and minerals, they are supportive to helping it. And maybe, and I'd like to get into this with hemp and cannabis with you, there's like a coevolution. The more that they can support us, the more that we want to grow them and support them.
Right. So it is things with like cannabis, or I'm sure everyone read the Michael Pollan book, Botany of Desire, where it's like, oh, this actually has a virus, but it keeps being replicated because humans like the look of that striation of the flower now, or whatever it is. And with the cannabis, I think, we have been cultivating it for 20,000 years or from some long period of time. And it's been growing for way longer than that. But I think that it does drop us little hints like, oh, you like this terpene profile, or you like this, your community needs the higher THC because you're using this maybe as a ceremonial. That I do think because of crossbreeding, we also a long time ago started breeding cannabis for specific traits. And then of course, cannabis is like, oh, you really like me? Well, let me give you more of this trait so you like me even more.
Yeah, is cannabis the longest relationship that humans have had with a plant?
I don't know if it is the longest, but it's definitely one of the longest. I know like hedge nettle and other plants have also been cultivated for a long period of time. And then even like the fig tree, we have been co-evolving and living alongside and somewhat manipulating the fig tree for maybe it's even been closer to like 30,000 years. And so they're definitely, cannabis is up there for sure, but I don't know if it's the longest.
Fun fact about the fig tree. So microgreen seeds, broccoli, radish, cabbage have a shelf life in the refrigerator of maybe 5 years. The fig tree, I believe, is the oldest known. The fig seed can be like 10,000 years old and still be plantable.
Yeah.
Whereas like many plants are only, 5, 10 years old. That's unbelievable.
That is unbelievable. And it really just shows, one, that it was one of our keystone plants, right? This is like one of those plants that probably helped humanity develop agriculturally and spiritually, right? Because the fig tree is such a spiritual tree. And also, like, what we really understand about nature is minute compared to what nature's actually capable of, right?
I invest a lot into lab testing these microgreens and talking to scientists and these labs. What I've come to realize is less than 10% of what's in these plants has actually been studied and discovered.
Right, because the rest of, it's just like, when they say, oh, we've discovered much more dark matter in the universe than we ever have. And it's like, well, one, we had no idea what to look for. And then we only have words or vocabulary for 10% of it. So the other 90% we just act like doesn't matter until somebody comes along and is like, oh no, look, now I'm going to call this, XYZ, and now we're going to say it's good for this. But without several decades of testing, we don't really know. But because based on information we have about another constituent that's so similar, either like molecularly or in its like action, then we act like we know what it's doing. But do we really know what it's doing if we only have vocabulary for 10% of what's actually in the plant? Because maybe it's something in the other 90% that's working alongside this constituent that is promoting, health or reducing inflammation or whatever it is. So I think we have a lot of information, but, I feel like we like to act like we know more than we do.
How important is lab testing in traditional Chinese medicine?
There's a lot of science and lab tests done with Chinese herbs, and it has been going on for a long time. And MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, they do a lot of studies with Chinese herbs and with acupuncture for cancer and post-cancer recovery and things like that. So it is really important and has been going on for a long time. The problem with testing herbs is unless you are really using a standardized extract of a specific constituent, every plant is going to have minute different amounts of all the constituents. So unless it's like maybe a cloned plant, but we clone cannabis plants, and we notice even with testing, there's, depending on the environment it's grown in, the testing may be slightly different. So that's one of the problems with herbs, in my opinion, is it's really hard to always say this batch is going to be exactly like the batch you tested before.
So you're growing clones. What does that business look like for you?
Well, growing clones is a joy. It is a dream come true as a cannabis activist to know that we are, overgrowing the government, if you will. At this point, we've overgrown the cannabis space for the cannabis industry, which has its own challenges. But it's great. With cloning cannabis plants, you can know what the phenotype is going to be like. So you can say, okay, for me, I really like plants that are short, kind of bushy, have a little bit of a stretch. You don't want it like too stretchy, but I want that like heart pounding head high. That it's great for meditation. It's great for energy. It's great for memory recall. But other people might want something totally different. So when you have a clone nursery, you can really specifically know the growth pattern and the effect of the cannabis plant.
So can you give us some examples of strains that you really like that give you that feeling that you're looking for?
One of old school that is not, now it's been so hybridized. I mean, all cannabis plants are hybridized. I will say that when people say indica or sativa, they are all indica hybrids, what we smoke here in the United States. But Trainwreck is an old school, strain from Northern California. And it's a beautiful plant to grow. It smells super petroleum-like. And it gives you that like really uplifting effect, which I think is important because so often cannabis is described as like, oh, you get couch lock, or people get lazy or apathetic. But really, if you have these like uplifting strains like Trainwreck or Sour Diesel, things like that, then that's not happening, or at least for most people. But people are different too. So sometimes I will say we grew a strain called Georgia Pine. It's from the Swamp Boys, down in Florida, and it's super heart pounding high for me. And then we've given it to other people, and they're like, that put me to sleep. So I think
Everybody's
constitutionally, everyone is different too.
Now, why do you think we have a whole endocannabinoid system that allows us to just like lock and key accept the benefits of the cannabis in such a easy way?
I think that goes along with evolving with plants. We obviously pre-cannabis, there were other plants that we were ingesting that also had cannabinoids that helped develop our endocannabinoid system. Just like plants that have been high in terpenes, we've also been ingesting for, hundreds of thousands of years. And so we have a liver detoxification enzyme system that allows us to break down flavonoids and terpenoids and I'm spacing the other constituent. But that basically would be toxic to our system if we didn't have the detoxification system that we had for us to ingest these substances. And so, it just always goes back to evolution, in my opinion.
So when people are going out to, say, a dispensary to purchase cannabis, and maybe they're new to it, it's still rolling out, from Chicago, just kind of rolled out. When I go to the dispensary there, it's like everything's really high THC. I don't see any CBD, anything. If I'm going to be active, I kind of like a 5-to-1 or even 20-to-1 CBD to THC. If I'm going to be active like in public, if it's just be me and myself, I'm just going to be in my garden or I'm just going to do my own thing, then it's fine. I'll have higher THC, but I do like having CBD mixed into it as well. It seems to ground me and balance me, and there's just a lot of the medicine in the CBD I really like and want. What might you recommend for somebody going to the dispensary so they know that for those that care about getting like clean cannabis, like how clean is the cannabis in a lot of dispensaries? Help people think about and just having a good experience.
It's so different state to state or even city to city, dispensary to dispensary. Now that most dispensaries are recreational, I don't feel like the medicinal side is as discussed anymore. And so when people come in Oklahoma, it's still medical, but most dispensaries aren't going to actually be educated on a lot of the medicinal properties of cannabis. It's just like any other retail job where you pick the jar you want based on appearance or smell or what the bud tender tells you. But there's not actually a lot of education that goes along with it. If they do have a hemp or a CBD side, then you might be able to find some high CBD flower. But a lot of a lot of the hemp stores now are selling ganja. They're not selling hemp. They may have had testing on something that said it was hemp, but if you were to do a lot of random testing, I think the THC level is going to be higher than what legally hemp is at 0.3% THC. So I would just quiz the bud tenders as much as you can to see what they have on their shelf that is going to be higher CBD. But like you said, it's actually more rare than you think to find high CBD cannabis. You can buy edibles and extracts that will be specifically 20-to-1 or 5-to-1. And so if you can get a high quality, what they call cannabis tincture, but it's really a cannabis oil. As an herbalist, that's one of my beefs is like a tincture is an alcohol extract. And what they sell as cannabis tincture at stores is actually cannabis oil. But I don't know why tincture sounds better, to them. But sorry, I digress because I have a lot of beefs about the cannabis vocabulary. But so you can get a 5-to-1 or a 20-to-1 edible or tincture, but I think that the testing isn't always consistent. And especially with edibles, depending on how they put the cannabis oil in the edible, you might not get a consistent dose. So if it's a 20 milligram edible and you're like, I only want to eat 5 milligrams or 10 milligrams, so I'm going to cut this in half. Well, you may have gotten the half that had all 20 milligrams
That's
in there.
happened to me.
Yeah.
When cannabis became, the day it became legal in Colorado, I went to the dispensary with some friends. We got some chocolate bars. So they're like, okay, this whole chocolate bar is 100 milligrams. And so we split it up, just 10 milligrams a piece. I think each of us had 100 milligrams in that because it was such a it was my first time with cannabis. I grew up very conservative Christian. It was like cannabis is the devil. I was like, okay, I'm not going to buy it off the street because I don't want to like overdose on cannabis, which is impossible. You can't do, which is great thing about natural plants versus synthetics. You can easily overdose on a synthetic. I just had way too much. And it was like a really anxious, like, experience to where my one buddy, he never had cannabis again after that. He's like, it was such a poor experience for him. So advice that I like to give is low and slow. Like you're just starting to introduce yourself to, it's like a handshake. Just start like really easy. You don't need to like jump into bed with this thing right away. If somebody is too high on cannabis or feeling anxious, or is there a way to, how can they bring comfort to themselves, or how can others bring comfort to them? Are there other herbs that can support, or kind of mindset?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny that you say that because first, going back to the edibles, is if you're not familiar with cannabis, don't start with edibles. They are so strong. I love cannabis. I've been smoking it for decades. I rarely eat edibles. And if I do, I'll get a 5 or a 10 milligram dose. And because really depending on your digestion, you don't know how fast it's going to hit, or if it's all going to hit at once, or it's going to be slow release. So I really do suggest people smoking it, because even if you feel like you got too high, it's that too high feeling's probably going to be gone after 20 or 30 minutes, as opposed with an edible, it could go on for hours.
Why is that? Why does an edible last so much longer?
I think part of it is it's really absorbing into your fat. Right. Whereas the smoking, a lot of it's going into your lungs. But this is actually going into your fat cells, which are what cannabinoids are attracted to. So I think it hits you like that. I also don't think the dosage is always correct. And then a lot of times with edibles too, you're using a distillate or an isolate, which is like 90% THC. Whereas if you're smoking flower, it might be like 20 or 25% THC. So I think it's just even though it's 20 milligrams, you're using a highly concentrated product to make the edibles, and it's not just like flour. Even though we've all been too high off the old school pot brownies too, So I would say start with smoking and take deep breaths. It will pass. There's, like you said, other than feeling uncomfortable, just use your techniques for grounding and centering. You can have like a sugary lemonade. Agua limon is something they used to use in Persia, like ancient, Middle Eastern drink for if you got too high off hash. So you can just have like a sugary lemonade. You could take like some nerving herbs like passion flower or valerian or California poppy or something. If you do feel like you need something to calm down, you can definitely use other herbs. But as my friend Tony recently said, the best advice I've ever gotten from anyone is he was talking about how he was starting to get a little paranoid, and he's been smoking for about 50 years or so. And then he came to this epiphany that you can never be too high. And it really is about just breathing through it and realizing, like, this is cannabis. You can't be too high. There is no detrimental effect. You're not going to have to end up in the hospital, even though, maybe you have heart racing and, take a hot bath, take a cold shower, take whatever it is that's comfortable to you to calm down. But just remember, you can't actually get too high.
What does too high mean? You can't get what? To where you can hurt yourself? To where...
Yeah, maybe you don't need to be driving a car because you're distracted by your anxiety because you feel like you're too high. But just meaning that, like, physiologically, it's not going to kill you. You may have moments of discomfort, but then you can just use that as a learning opportunity to what can I do when I am feeling uncomfortable to bring myself back to a centered space.
Can CBD counteract?
CBD can counteract. But I don't think it's going to have the same effect as, like, how do I say this? CBD can counteract, and that's why you do have CBD in cannabis, right? Because there's THC and CBD, and they are the regulatory components of one another. But I don't know if you're super high on weed and then you go and take a CBD extract, I haven't heard of anyone coming down from that. Not to say it wouldn't work, but I haven't seen that.
Are you aware of coffee being able to support? I've heard of people even just taking coffee grounds or a coffee bean and that, just like chewing on that, sucking on that.
Coffee jacks me so much. I can't
too.
imagine ever telling somebody to do that to counteract THC. I would say try the lemonade.
Okay.
And then if that doesn't work, maybe some passion flower tincture or tea. And, maybe if you are feeling like tense in the body because of it, you could add skullcap in there as well. So you could utilize your other herbs that are calming to the nervous system.
How would you describe the spirit of the cannabis plant? Like who is the cannabis plant?
I think it's individual. So I would hate to say that everybody has this same relationship with the cannabis plant. For me, cannabis brings me into my deepest meditations. I feel it is very expansive and it gives me a wider world view. When I am feeling a little pigeonholed in the mundanity of life or the stress of like this physical being on the planet at this time, then I smoke cannabis. I go outside, or I'm smoking cannabis outside usually, and I can everything gets a little brighter. Audio wise, I can start hearing everything more. I drop into a centered space. So for me, cannabis is just something that reminds me that there is more going on in the world than our, small minds can perceive. Because we get so caught up, we have to buy groceries, we have to work, we have to do all of these things that for a lot of our evolutionary history, that's not how we lived. And I'm not convinced that that's actually how we're supposed to be living. I really do believe we're supposed to live more harmoniously with nature in smaller communities, taking care of each other, not how do they say it? Pathologizing everything, because now that's where plants are going, is this plant treats this pathology. And I just don't think that's how they're meant to be used.
What is the slippery or maybe like the shadow side of cannabis? Because I have, within myself, I've experienced maybe like an emotional addiction to cannabis years ago, to where it turned into a slippery slope for me, to where I would wake up and I would smoke cannabis, and then I did fall into that more lazy way of life. Now I have I think a really beautiful relationship with cannabis, to where I use it to be active, to lift me up, to be with my girlfriend, or but I do have to have still some rules around it, where I just won't have cannabis before 5 p.m. Otherwise, I'm just like, I just want to have cannabis all the time.
Well, she's just calling your name.
She is.
I think I never believe there's only one thing contributing to why somebody would have a behavior with a substance, right? And we'll use cannabis and say it's a substance right now, right? Whether that's the person can't wake up in the morning because they didn't have their coffee, right? Mm-hmm. We see that a lot. We're not coffee drinkers, but I know amongst our coffee drinking friends, we see that. And I feel that with cannabis too. It's just another thing that is filling a void, whether that's, this is the easy thing I can choose right now, instead of like, I could go wake up, walk for 15 minutes, sprint for 5, walk for 15, sprint for 5. And that would probably wake me up the same as that cup of coffee. Mm-hmm. Or that will settle me into my day just like smoking that joint. Mm-hmm. So I think it's human nature to just choose the easy route, And I also think that there are things in cannabis that do make it appealing, to make us want it more. Kind of like you were saying earlier, is these plants want us to be enticed by them. So we keep them around, so we grow them, so we don't, mow over that and put something else in its place, right? So, so I think cannabis is a little tricky like that. She can give you that, like, oh, don't you want me more and more? But I think it's also, for most people, it's like, are they going to have that behavior with other substances too? They probably are. And cannabis is the least benign if you are going to, utilize it too much.
I've never been called to another substance in
No.
the same way. With alcohol, I've really only sat with like natural plant medicines, not too many synthetics, but no synthetic has really called to me. But yeah, the cannabis and tobacco. I like tobacco in like a ceremonial way. I really like to pray with it. I like to have tobacco and cannabis together.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, the masculine and the feminine. It's a good balance. Have you ever sat in a cannabis ceremony?
I have, well, yes, I guess to say I did a ganja yoga class.
And is ganja another name for cannabis?
Yeah, ganja is another name for cannabis. Yeah, it's used in India and also in Jamaica, and the Ganges River, and the sadhus who go into their deep meditation with cannabis. So a lot of Shivites, followers of Shiva, that's part of the spiritual practice is smoking cannabis and going into like these incredibly deep meditations, and then the Rastas borrowed the term, and so yeah. So I typically will use the words ganja or hemp. That's how I classify because it's all cannabis. So if I want to differentiate whether I'm talking about hemp or weed, I'll say ganja. But around hemp.
So hemp being more like CBD, ganja being more like THC.
Well, not only CBD, but hemp being an industrial product for fiber as well, and seed, right? Because I do a hemp smoothie every morning, and that's just ground up hemp seeds.
When is the U.S. going to get into the hemp seed game? I think over 90% is coming from Canada today.
A lot of it comes from China, a lot of it comes from Canada, and a lot of it comes from France. And Eastern Europe now too. Like when CBD really started getting popular here in the United States, most of the CBD oil that people were buying, were, like on the internet, was from Eastern Europe, from industrial hemp. So the cool thing about that for Colorado is they started growing hemp, and then a lot of the Colorado companies were making their own CBD oil from not just industrial hemp, but ganja-esque. Some of them may or may not have had the CBD levels as they should, or the THC levels.
Because that level is 0.3%, goes over that. That's considered like going hot. And then you're
Right.
supposed to get rid of that crop, like completely burn
Absolutely.
it maybe.
But if you're not testing every plant, how do you know?
And
And if you had clones, at least that gives you a better idea. But a lot of people, especially in the hemp market, they're planting seeds. The agricultural level is so much larger, it wouldn't be cost productive to do it by clone. Because you can't, you can if you have all the machinery, but most people are putting a bunch of seeds out, not putting a bunch of clones out.
And the seeds are, well, for industrial hemp, the seed is the least expensive seed of every seed that I've grown. I've grown, I don't know, 20, 50 different types of microgreen seeds. Average seed cost is about $20, maybe $30 per pound. Industrial hemp seed, you just buy a 5-gallon bucket worth, is $5 a pound.
Yep.
Very inexpensive.
Very inexpensive. And
Grow some
probably, and great as an industrial product. But I would like to start seeing more studies on the difference of lab tests between, okay, well, what about this, what we'll call North American hemp, which has morphed into just the way a lot of people are growing it now, like they grow ganja. Lots of space between the plants so they can get big and bushy, whereas industrial hemp, you're growing a bunch right beside each other, and they're just like really tall and narrow. You're not letting them become big, bushy plants.
Because you're growing them for the stalk.
Because you're growing it for the stalk. You're growing it for an industrial product, not for, really pretty flowers. And,
For seed or for medicine. What are some of your favorite examples of industrial hemp products?
My favorite examples of it for ingestion or just in general?
Well, like we used to grow our microgreens in hemp mats.
Oh,
I
yeah.
thought that was really cool. Anti-pest, mold, bacteria, fungus, lightweight. They're super water absorbent. So I'm like, wow, this is a really cool use case for like the woven fiber of the hemp stalk.
Absolutely. So, like animal bedding has become really big. Mulch. If we could replace mulch with cannabis, then we wouldn't be, using wood chips, right? We wouldn't need to be cutting down trees to make mulch when we could just be using cannabis. Our friends in Georgia just built an entire hempcrete house. I haven't been able to see it yet, but supposedly the hempcrete has one of the highest ratings for being fire resistant and fireproof. So those are all great ways. I still love like hemp clothing. I think there's, I don't want to be one of those like hemp for victory. It can like solve the world's problems.
But it does
kind
have
of can.
it has a lot of use cases,
Yeah.
surprisingly. I mean,
Yep.
we've talked about food with the seeds, medicine with the CBD and all these other cannabinoids as well, and then fiber for everything from paper to houses to you can grow things in it.
Yeah, yeah. And just talking about the medicine a little bit, THC, really great for pain. CBD, really great for spasms and reducing inflammation. And THC absolutely reduces inflammation as well. But THC is also really good for helping stimulate appetite. So for people who do, Ethan Russo did a study many, many years ago with cancer patients and THC products or just THC. And not only did it help reduce the pain, and the higher the level of THC, the higher the level of pain reduction. Maybe because it did put you in a different headspace, right? So you kind of get out of the loop, the pain loop, but also to stimulate appetite, which is really important.
What do you think with cannabis getting stronger and stronger? Is there a slippery slope around that?
I'm not convinced it's getting stronger and stronger, to be honest with you, because I smoke a lot of weed. And
Well, you might have a tolerance, but my understanding is
no, I don't. But I will smoke something that is a newer bred strain. And of course, they're all coming from older strains, right? Because that's how breeding works. And they may be testing higher for THC on the lab test, but one, I don't really trust the cannabis labs because people want the higher THC numbers. So I think labs manipulate
They're
the numbers.
incentivized.
Yep. But I get higher off old school strains than I do off some of this new stuff that maybe has a more robust terpene profile sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't. But a lot of times they are testing higher in THC than the old school strains. But they're not stronger. I don't feel like the high lasts as long. It's not as what's the word I'm looking for? Inspirational. I don't get the same level of like, okay, now I'm going to go into this deep meditation. It's just like you were talking about, it's the habit. It's like, oh, I'm just smoking this joint, but all of the like profound effects I get with cannabis aren't necessarily in there. So I don't know how I feel about it's getting stronger. I just don't know if that's true.
what about? I've never tried this, and I'm forgetting the name of it, but it's the concentrate of it that you said it was 90%. What's that called?
Oh, like a distillate or an isolate?
Yeah.
Yeah. That is used a lot in the tinctures or the cannabis oils and in the edibles because it's just easier to work with, and a lot of
It's
the
more
vape.
consistent.
It is more consistent, and a lot of people don't want to smell like the smoke, right? Because the vape pens, we all know vape carts. There's a lot of not truth in advertising in those, and a lot of times that's just isolate or distillate. Excuse me. isolate would be melted down into liquid diamonds. So that's a term you might see. Or it'll be distillate with plant-based terpenes added to it. So it really is this inferior product because you're not getting this whole plant medicine. You're getting this chemically produced distillate or isolate. I have a cannabis processing facility in Oklahoma, and we use butane, and it's a very clean product because we have it tested
And why is butane so clean? It just evaporates off?
because you back it off. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was in the CBD space for a little bit, and I brought a CBD tea to market, and it was vapor distilled. And then I had to make it in like a sticky powder, and then I had this big roller, and I put the tea and the sticky powder in, and then the sticky CBD powder would just coat the leaves of the CBD, and it was water soluble.
Oh, and was it a where is this product now?
It was. I was doing microgreens. I was just being overly innovative, and I was like, okay, now I have to educate on microgreens and CBD. This is way too much. Oh, also being in the CBD business, just operationally was like handcuffing me. I'm like, I can't. My insurance is 10x, and my banking, my payment processing, I can't run I was like, holy cow, is this complicated?
Oh, yeah, no, it is definitely, they do not make it easy to be in the cannabis space, whether it's ganja or hemp, and that's something that hopefully is going to change.
Yeah. What's the state of cannabis and hemp in the U.S. today?
The state of cannabis is like you kind of talked about, whether it's hemp or ganja, banking is incredibly difficult. And, most businesses run off loans and credit and things like that. And none of that is available to cannabis people. Hemp has been, as we know, through the Hemp Bill Act or through the, what was it called? The Farm Bill, where they allowed hemp in, I think that was like 2019 or 2020. It really created this loophole for hemp stores to sell things like THCA, which is technically not considered a drug under the Farm Bill. They're starting to roll that back a little bit because they've realized that THCA just means it's ganja that hasn't been burnt yet, because when it burns, it converts THCA to THC. So people are selling THCA flower, but when you burn it, that's THC. So, just if you live in a state where weed is not legal, maybe your local hemp store has something for you. And then, we all heard about Delta 9 and Delta 8 and all of that. So
What's your opinion on those? I've never tried them.
Honestly, I haven't either. What I have read and what I've heard is it's not it can be an inferior product, and you can have negative side effects, because anytime we're just having one constituent and not the whole plant medicine, we're not going to get all the benefits. And we may the entourage. So we may just get, I think it was with THC, with Delta 8, people were saying that it puts you to sleep. Delta 9, I knew people who were taking it and getting severe anxiety. I don't really have a good answer, but I'm not a proponent of it. If that's your only source and you're getting some benefit of it, but I would just ask your supplier is like, where is this coming from? It was this CBD that was grown in America. Is this Delta 8 coming from Asia? Like,
No.
where is this coming from?
Well, now with the Farm Bill, hemp CBD is federally legal. Ganja does not have that. Is that right?
Yes.
So ganja is state by state, and it could be either recreational, meaning anyone that's 18 plus can go to a dispensary and purchase it, or it's medical only, and that means you have to get a doctor's kind of note or special card from a doctor to say, like, yep, you can buy this.
Yes. So, and some states will have both. So in the medical states, and recreational is 21 and over, not 18.
Okay.
And then medical is 18 and over, or special permission if it's a child, then they are exceptions for children having a medical cannabis card.
Like maybe they have epilepsy and they're having seizures.
Yes, maybe, or they have, cancer or leukemia or,
Oh, wow.
something
Okay.
like that. So there are instances where children are allowed to have a medical card. In some states where they do have medical and recreational, you can buy more in the medical side, and a lot of times the percentage of the milligrams of THC can be higher in products on the medical side than on the recreational side. So I think here in Colorado, if you walk into a dispensary as an adult use product or a recreational product, 100 milligrams per package is the highest milligrams it can go. Whereas if you go into a medical dispensary, I believe it's 1,000 milligram product you can buy because it's a medical product. In Oklahoma, where it's just medical, you can buy it's 1,000 milligrams THC.
What's an average dose for somebody? Maybe first time, and then maybe like try it your second time.
I mean, if it's first time, I really say try 5 milligrams. You could do 10. Average for a lot of people I know is 20 milligrams once they have a tolerance, but I can't necessarily say they're using it for a medical reason, they're just getting high, which I see nothing wrong with that. And in Oklahoma, people are taking like 50 and 100 milligrams at a time, which to me is insane and makes me question the testing. Are those products really as strong as they say they are? Because I can't imagine taking 100 milligrams at a time and not having the worst experience of my life,
So back to the kind of like the State of the Union on hemp and ganja. The U.S. was under prohibition for over 80 years. We've lost, a lot of the knowledge on how to farm it, a lot of the infrastructure on how to process it, just a lot of misinformation. People are confused on what it is. Ganja, hemp, the same thing. They were both, made illegal. You expressed that Canada, China, parts of Europe they never went under prohibition. They're doing a good job with it. Who do you look to out there, maybe country-wise, that is really innovating, maybe at the kind of like tip of the spear, doing the best job with these plants?
I don't know who's doing the best job, but I do know I'm seeing some pretty good things come out of Hungary. They are really embracing hemp again as a commodity because they are a country who struggles financially, especially on the world market. So they're really being innovative and allowing for the production of CBG and CBD, CBD, CBC. So I don't see a lot of other countries really doing that where they're like, okay, well, let's tap into the CBG market. Let's do some research on what's going on there. In the industrial hemp and the aromatherapy market, France. Like if we get like hemp essential oil, like we would lavender essential oil or pine or our other plants, a lot of that is coming out of France. Super high in beta caryophyllene, so it would be great for skincare products, great for, bowel inflammation, great for, antioxidants, everything like that. So I don't know who's out there doing it the best because I can't say I've researched a lot of what's going on in other countries, but those are the top two.
If somebody is maybe new to entrepreneurship and they're looking to get into the hemp or ganja space, what's an area that you like right now?
I'm a little jaded right now because I've been in cannabis for almost 30 years and I've seen it go in directions that have been completely surprising to me as things do become more generic, But what I do find is any sort of farming. Farming is the hardest work you could possibly do. But if you are into getting your hands dirty and working really hard, I don't know if I would start my own hemp farm, but maybe there's a co-op of people that you could work with. I think we need more American hemp grown, especially if we want to continue to see the CBD market and the cannabis market thrive here. There's no reason why we can't grow our own hemp.
And grow for what? Because we can grow for fiber, for seed, for
We need to grow it
CBD.
for all of it. in my opinion. I don't think we need to say one is more important than the other. I think we need, like I said, my hemp protein powder every morning. Wouldn't it be incredible if we didn't have to get that product from Canada? Like I love Canada and I want to utilize their products. Why can't we have that going on in Wisconsin, right? Which used to be a huge hemp growing region of the United States. And they had all the infrastructure. And then slowly, they just took all the machinery away, sold it off to other countries, or stopped the patent.
Just when it went under
Just
prohibition.
when it went under prohibition.
Yeah, they're
exactly.
like, well, we can't use it. So that's a big thing for someone looking to get into the space. Kind of depends on where you're at and if there's infrastructure around you to process.
Yeah, and that's been the biggest problem with hemp producers is the infrastructure of somebody processing it. Especially if we wanted an industrial hemp market here, we don't have a way to process it in America. So unless we're going to ship,
decorticator?
I don't know what it's called.
I think it's called a decorticator, and that's what they put the fiber through this machine, and it breaks it down in a way that then they could weave it into shirts, or they can just work it because you can't hard to just work with like bark.
Yeah, exactly. And are you familiar with Winona LaDuke? She is a Native American activist, and she is recently trying to reinvigorate the hemp industry of the Great Plains states up there, like the Northern Plains states, and that is what her biggest thing was like we used to have all of the technology here. It got piecemealed out. They took it apart. They sold it off. We have the ability. We know how. They have the blueprints. But they don't have anyone who thinks that it's viable enough to build this machinery so we could have an industrial hemp industry in the United States. So until it's incentivized, most of the things take off in America because of government subsidies, right?
And that's how it is in Canada, heavily subsidized, I believe.
So without subsidies, we're a profit-based culture, and so if somebody doesn't see profit in it and the government's not going to give subsidies on it, I don't know how quickly that could move forward.
And I wonder if for some getting into CBD, the operational side, very complicated. We talked about that. But then also there's a bit of a boom and bust. Everybody rushed into the farming, a little bit of a gold rush for maybe a year or two. There was the demand was much stronger than the supply, and then the supply came in like massive, and it was really is that true? Did that happen?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like that with all farming, right? It's like again, if that could have been subsidized, then maybe people wouldn't have lost so much money. I think a lot of it though was people being greedy as well, because people who actually don't care about plants were like, how can I make $1 million? And everyone thinks they're going to do it off weed, but if you've ever had a job in agriculture, you're not making $1 million right off the bat, or maybe ever. So I think that green rush was a lot of people getting excited, and a lot of closet cannabis lovers did get to come out and finally admit that they love cannabis. But I think there was a little greed push on that too.
Mm-hmm. In your book, you share that we share 60% of our DNA with a banana. And maybe it's that way for most plants.
Yeah, it is.
What should people take from that understanding? We share so much. We're actually we have so much in common with these plants at a genetic DNA level.
I think regardless of your belief system, whether we were going to use the word evolution, which is what the word I use, or if you want to say, we are made in God's image and we were put on this planet, by a higher force like that, then regardless of which way you're going to say it, these plants are part of us, whether God put them here for us and to be with us and for us to enjoy the fragrances and, the bounty, or if some cosmic, accident happened and we've eventually evolved this way over, billions of years. We are all the same substances. We are all made of whatever word, stardust, whatever you want to say we're made of. And I feel like that should be enough. It's like we have so much more in common with everything on the planet. Then why can't we just acknowledge that and be okay with it? You know, I really just want to say that, you know, we're here. This is what we have. This is what has been provided for us or given to us. And we should just like revel in that. That should just be like, look at how similar we are. Look at how much we have in common. Look at how you sustain me and I help sustain you. And
how connected we are.
connected we are. Yeah.
That's one of the beautiful things about cannabis and you know, some of these other medicinal sacred plant medicines is they help me to shift my perspective to where I then can remember that. I'm like, oh, I'm connected into this tree, into this friend, and these things that come up like these synchronicities of like, oh, I'm thinking of my grandma right now, and then she calls me. It's like, oh, because we're connected, even though she's in Chicago. It's like we're all connected. We're all. Is that a belief that you share?
Absolutely. Yeah. My cousin and I were just talking about that yesterday, but more on the realm of people who had passed, where it's like you have this like dream or memory of someone, and then, you know, you walk outside your door and, you know, from 100 yards away, you can smell the rose bush that you're like, oh, that's the smell. You know, like that was the memory of my grandmother. And then you go and then you have that smell of rose, or you hear her favorite song, or, you know, something like that, because dead or alive, you know, we're all connected. You know, that connection never breaks.
So speaking of smell, you have an essentials oil company, is that right?
Yes, I make 5-element essential oil blends, you know, based on the 5 elements of Chinese medicine, and small batch, nothing, you know, I'm not like a big company or anything, but they're great. As somebody who practices Chinese medicine, you know, and we believe in the cycles of nature. And so the essential oil blends are based on Chinese medicine philosophy, as well as herbs that actually will help either invigorate or kind of smooth out some of those components that go along with, let's say, the earth element, right? So earth element is about balance, and it's about nurturing yourselves, and it's also about digestion, and you know, the process of metabolism. So in the blend for the earth element is hemp essential oil, which we know is really great for digestive issues because it's high in that beta caryophyllene, and it also has citrus peel. And citrus peel in Chinese medicine regulates qi of the digestion. So really blending that, like what's going on with the element with plants that can help benefit that area of the body.
Would you share the 101 on the Chinese medicine philosophy and what these 5 elements are?
Yeah, the 101 is really simple. It is that we are part of nature and nature is part of us. And then on the bigger scale, we are part of the cosmos and the cosmos are part of us. And so when we can live a life as much as possible in this modern world to where we do appreciate and can reflect the cycles of nature and the cosmos, then we have a better chance of having longer life and better health and a calmer sense of being because we have this deeper connection to the greater world around us. And the 5 elements, although they're called elements, they're actually always changing dynamic forces in the universe or on the earth. And so the wood element is associated with springtime, the color green, the wind, and sometimes will be called the general because people with like a predominant wood energy may be can be a little overbearing, or they can be very compassionate leaders. And so the wood element, go ahead.
Oh, I was wondering if there's anyone that you could point to, maybe just to help personify some of the, is there a wood element famous person to help people kind of ground it, connect to it?
Most of our world leaders have we all have all 5 elements within us. When we say somebody's a wood person, that might just be something that's out of balance or extremely in balance, and that's why we can kind of call that out. But most of our politicians who are trying to rule the world are probably wood element people. And then after the
In an out of balanced way.
in an out of balanced way. Well, actually, in an imbalanced way, if somebody like a wood imbalance would be like a leader where they're trying to make positive change for everyone in their community. That is a wood element. And then out of balance is the dictator, is the tyrant, the person who is trying to exert control for their own personal gain, not for the benefit of the community.
And those are easy to kind of identify. Are there ones that are in balance that come to mind for you?
Imbalance would be, an imbalance wood element to me is somebody like Jane Goodall, which doesn't really make sense to a lot of people because she's very soft-spoken. But she is, her entire adulthood life, she has been on this path of education and protection, and she's literally been in the trees with with primates for decades, So sometimes it's people who really like the forest, where you're like, I feel the most comfortable when I'm surrounded by trees. That might just give a little insight into, okay, well, maybe it's because they're from the desert, and so they're like deficient in the wood element and they want to be around trees. And sometimes it's like, well, this is just where I feel the most nurtured, right? Like I'm one of those people. I've had multiple people in Chinese medicine school tell me I was wood element because I have a pretty good head on my shoulders, and when I see a goal, I can't accomplish it. And another wood element attribute is shouting or being really loud. And in general, I speak really loudly and can be kind of forceful if I'm trying to, weave my way into the story. So I would be considered a wood element person, but we have every element. So
This podcast is brought to you by Be Micro, organic freeze-dried microgreens for easy, natural nutrition. Sprinkle them on any meal and enjoy the benefits. Shop now at bemicro.farm and use code STEVE15 to save.
My friend that's a doctor of Chinese medicine, she says that I think I'm more metal.
yeah. Did she happen to say why she thought you were more
I think
metal?
she did. She got a new house and I gifted her a bunch of metal, and I didn't even realize that I gifted her a flashlight and a knife. And she's like, look at all this metal. She's like, she's probably more wood. She's like, I just don't have any metal around me. And I'm just like, here's 2 things of metal.
Yeah, because metal cuts wood. So she's like, well, and I also feel like you are really spiritual too. Mm-hmm. And you really you're not surface on the, if you're going to get in, you want to get deep in there. And metal people do tend to be more spiritually minded people as well. And that could be
newly so. Maybe in the last, since I started this company, I had a spiritual awakening. And then I went from over a decade of software sales, and that was really great, to I'm like, I'm all in on plants, and I need to figure out how to be on team plants.
Yeah. Well, and you also grew up in a religious household. So whether or not you adhered to that in your teen years or whatever, you had a community rooted in spirit, whether it's the spirit that, I don't know if you still, practice that philosophy, but, that was part of your life from a very young age.
Just as you said, there's many kind of spirits, guides, soul friends to pray to. Jesus is part of who I pray to. I don't go to church and practice in that kind of way, but there's many beautiful teachings there. And then there's parts that I'm like, that doesn't really work for me.
Well, Jesus was not that I knew him personally back in the day, but the spirit of Jesus, I feel like is very metal, because metal people also cut things off, right? They're very cut and dry. It's like, I'm done, we're done, right? There is no like, oh, well,
Sometimes
maybe
to a
you
fault
can
for
weave.
me.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm like, ooh, I kind of cut that a little hard.
And I can do that too,
Mm-hmm.
because, we all have a little bit of the element, but Jesus was definitely all spirit personified, literally.
Mm-hmm.
But also when he had had enough, he cut that off. Right. I mean, just to, when he got mad at the temple, right. And was like, what are you doing? That was a very metal act, because there was kind of no going back from that one.
Would you say there's one that the average person is? Are there more people in kind of one camp than another?
I don't think so, because I don't think like I mean, I don't really like to think of people as just average. But I mean, I would say, maybe in different communities, there might be a propensity to have more of a what we call a causative factor, or that one element becoming more predominant than the other. In the way I look at it is like, I know people from all over the world, and I can't say that they all have a predominant element. Maybe if you hang out with similar type people all the time, then you're going to see that. But even within families, I mean, we have completely different personality types within the same family, even.
Are more people moving towards Chinese medicine as practitioners and as patients of it? Is it growing, or what's kind of the state of that?
I think practitioner-wise, it is. Acupuncturists do not have a robust lobbying sect to our profession like other professions, like chiropractors, physical therapists, osteopathic doctors, medical doctors. They all have lobbyists that help them create what their practice is going to look like, and legally who can practice that medicine. Acupuncture doesn't have a unified force like that. So I think other modalities and other practitioners are borrowing a lot from Chinese medicine and incorporating that into their practices, which I think we all need more of that Chinese medicine practice. So I'm very happy to see that. But as an acupuncturist who does have to, I want to protect our profession as well. But, a lot of massage therapists now are doing cupping and gua sha, which is a traditional Chinese medicine practice or East Asian practice. And then a lot of chiropractors and physical therapists are doing dry needling. And if you're a chiropractor, you can do acupuncture. And if you're a medical doctor, you can do acupuncture with very little education on it, which, again, they're already medical doctors in the case of an MD or a chiropractor. So you probably don't need as much training, because you've already had all of the medical training. But so I think practitioners are using it a lot more, and so it is growing because of that. And then I think patients or people really want to be well, and so I think they are pulling from different modalities, because what they have been using in their healthcare hasn't been enough.
Who is like the greatest ally to Chinese medicine in the U.S. right now? Is there support? Is there grants, funding?
I don't know much about grants or funding. MD Anderson is great for their own research, but I don't think they're giving funding to other facilities. The NCCAOM is our national regulatory board, and I know that they have been working diligently with very little budget to not only protect the Chinese medicine profession, but also give training to professionals in ways that we kind of lack in acupuncture school. Because you kind of have to come out and be an entrepreneur. There are more options now for acupuncturists to get out of school and go work for like Kaiser and other things, and work within a hospital setting under the direction of a medical doctor. But
And insurance is starting to cover acupuncture, is that right?
insurance has been covering acupuncture for a long time. And I was a VA provider, so the VA does also provide if you're a VA provider, you can work with the VA to provide acupuncture to veterans and soldiers that have a chronic pain diagnosis. So if it's chronic pain, the VA will potentially cover it. And workers' comp also covers acupuncture. But over time, you're getting less and less reimbursement for that. So it's great for the patient. It's not great for the practitioner because you're not making a living wage. You may be getting paid $35 for a treatment. Workers' comp and VA paid very well, but even I've heard they're not paying as well as they once were. So it's great, again, for the patients, but if the practitioners can't afford to accept the insurance, then they're not getting it as they should.
So you were working with the VA?
You can sign up to become a VA provider. So we don't work with the VA, but we do get referrals from them.
What would you say are some of the tools that are most helpful to our veterans?
I think one is on a greater scale, there needs to be more. They all need to get paid more, in my opinion. My dad was in the Army for 20 years. He, so I grew up a military brat. And, thankfully insurance was included, or we would have been broke. If my parents would have had to pay our medical bills growing up, we never would have made it as a family, So I think military people definitely need to be paid more. And then once they get out, there needs to be better services for them, not only for their mental health, but their physical health. From several veterans I know, listening to them speak about what they have to go to at the VA or how far they have to travel to utilize the VA is not ethical, number one, especially once we've, put them on this pedestal as if we're going to care for them once they get out. And it's almost like I've heard more than one time they've felt discarded by the government, number one, and by the communities because, they may get a handshake on 4th of July or on Veterans Day or whatever, but on the day-to-day, they're not being treated as the, air quote, heroes that they are,
Yeah, they're doing the ultimate risk. It's like, okay, I fail in business, like big deal.
Yeah.
You fail in just one day on your job over in war, and you and your friends might get seriously injured or killed.
Absolutely. And the suicide rate for veterans and the homelessness rate for veterans is appalling.
Yeah, it's really disappointing.
And the fact that, the Department of Defense has this incredibly large budget, and then this is how our veterans are living, like my dad, when he got out, he was 18 when he went to the Vietnam War, did his 20 years, got out when he was 38 years old. And that's really young. And thankfully, because of that, he did get to go to school for free. He got his bachelor's degree when I was in high school. He went back to college. But then he couldn't live off his military retirement. There was no way he was going to be able to then retire, although he just spent 20 years in the military. So he went and got a job with the state of Florida, and
Is that part of the promise? You do 20 years and then you get some type of a package, retirement, you get some type of a payment every month?
Yep. And then at some point, usually, he could have re-enlisted for another 10 years and he would have gotten even more money if he did the other 10 and then
that seems like a
30.
long time to be in.
It's like, you've paid 20 years of your life, man. You've paid enough. So then even after he retired from the state of Florida, his 2 retirement packages were nothing to really give him a very comfortable living wage, which is criminal to me, So, and he wasn't an officer. If you're an officer, your retirement package is much better. But as an enlisted man, or woman.
Much more respect and support needed for the veterans, many friends that are veterans and also active duty currently. And one thing that I'm of great appreciation of from them when it comes to plants is they are maybe the tip of the spear in helping to get some of these plants that are illegal, like CBD, cannabis, psilocybin, legalized, because who could stand up against the veterans? And they're helping the veterans, and they're really helping to usher some of these powerful medicines through.
Yeah, I really give it to MAPS. There's so many psychedelic wellness businesses out there now that are for profit and heavily invested with tech bro money. But MAPS has stayed a nonprofit organization. So I feel like, and they've helped a lot with veterans, and then also, terminally ill people with MDMA and other things, psilocybin. So I definitely say that is a benefit. And yes, we need to look to our veterans because they are one of the most conservative populations. So if a veteran is saying mushrooms are helping me, especially on a large scale, right? If multiple, studies are going on, they say they're being helped. That's kind of hard to deny. Than if somebody like you and I were like, no, this is helping me. And they're like, oh, yeah, sure, you're just enjoying the effects of it. But on that note, I do want to say I have a little concern with pathologizing mental health and plant medicine because I don't believe that's necessarily the best avenue we need to take. I think it's a good gateway into accepting plant medicine, but I take issue with it becoming commodified by one profession or group of people because these plants are for all of us in any way we want to take them at any time. And if we start saying, no, only a therapist can prescribe them, then I don't like that pigeonholing. And I also know that not every therapist is great. Just like not every acupuncturist is great. Just not like every business owner is great. Not just every farmer is great.
My first therapist was an alcoholic. And I thought I was giving him more therapy than he was giving me.
Right. So then if you're dealing with some deep trauma, like taking it back to the veterans, right, with war trauma, and you have somebody who's, sure, there's a therapist and they took a weekend course on psychedelic therapy, are they actually the best provider for this sacred space? Maybe that person would be better off with the shaman in ceremony.
Oh, for
right?
sure. Oh, for sure.
And more than likely they probably are. But I know that's not always accessible or palatable for people because some people are going to be more comfortable in that clinical setting. So I don't want to say it's negative, but it doesn't sit well with me when I see the profit and the profiteering that's going on in that space, and the control. Because people, that wood element likes to control, so then people feel powerful because they're providing you with this magic, right? So
we are on this path to where psilocybin is now moving into the U.S. in a more legalized way. It's been decriminalized here in Colorado and in Oregon.
And in Oakland.
Oh, in Oakland
Yep.
as well. Okay.
Yep.
And you can sit with a therapist that has some level of training. How much are they respecting the lineage and the ancestry and what type of container is that and all of that is I'm not sure. That's not interesting to me to sit in that kind of a way. But there's also but it's now allowing people to have access to it that wouldn't before. Say my family that's very conservative Christian that's like, whoa, alcohol is okay, but everything else is the devil. Maybe they'd be more open to it. As soon as the government made CBD federally legal, my family was just like, okay, yeah, let's do CBD's great. If Big Daddy government says it's good, then it's good. But then it's also really expensive to sit with these therapists, $2,000 to $5,000. I had spoken with some of them, and I had somebody on the podcast that has a platform that helps connect these psychedelic therapists with patients. So he's like, that's the average cost. And he was also saying, his name's Nico. Do you know Nico? He's in town here, serial entrepreneur, unbelievable. His podcast will be coming out soon. Well, he was also saying that the pharmaceuticals are now getting into the business as well, and they're figuring out what compound or what is being activated in the brain, what psilocybin is doing from like a chemical level, and they're finding other chemicals to activate that. So now they're bringing like their, proprietary, patented pharmaceutical to the table, and then that is allowing for insurance to then cover it. So there's some benefit because it's allowing more people, but then it's like, okay, it's widening, but then will it then like close in again once the pharmaceuticals have the control? Is that the concern?
That is absolutely the concern. And the same with cannabis, because there have been, GW Pharmaceuticals and a couple other companies already have patents on specific like blends of cannabinoids and terpenoids. And eventually they're going to capitalize on that as soon as it becomes federally legal. But if it's not federally legal, they can't do much with it. But as soon as it is, then that means they can go after mom and pops who are making a very similar product. And I see the same concern with psilocybin for sure.
Are there any other plants that speak to you? Like if you have a whole section in your book about wisdom plants, and you list reishi, angelica, which I wasn't familiar with before, rosemary, hawthorn. How do those, what makes a plant a wisdom plant?
For me, it's plants that I've gained great insight from, or that, throughout history of herbalism that people have, called these plants wisdom plants. For me, they're the ones that either really give me that perspective of, that deeper connection with like heart medicine. And that, I don't know if you're familiar with Heart Math, if they're an institute in Santa Cruz area or the Santa Cruz Mountains. I don't know if they're still there, but working on the connection between the brain and the heart. And in Chinese medicine, we call that the Shen, Shen, which is the mind, the heart, and the spirit connection. And so all of those plants for me that's one of the connections that they make. And maybe physically they actually do something to activate. Like with rosemary, it actually does improve blood flow to the brain. And it can help with, coronary arteries, with plaque in the arteries. But for me, those wisdom plants are the ones that I can take very, very small amount and get that instant insight from. Whereas other plants, you kind of have to hang out with for a long period of time for them to, start giving you little pieces of their information. But those 4 plants with me, like I'll take a sip and immediately, I just feel that activation.
And that activation is dropping more from your head and into your heart?
Yeah, definitely dropping from my head and into my heart. And also with that heart expansion, I am thinking clearer. I am seeing things from a broader perspective and not in my own, we get so pigeonholed in our own viewpoint, right? And our own judgments, really. And so they really get me out of my judgment and into my, we're back to we are just all one and we are connected. And if we want to make it on this planet and thrive and be happy, then maybe we need to take a little bit more of these wisdom plants, right, to remind us, because I get caught up all the time. And I feel, I've had people be like, you've been meditating for like 30 years and you're still so angry. And it's like, well, there's a lot to be angry about, but I'm going to put my best foot forward if I can have this viewpoint of what the wisdom plants can bring to us, because otherwise I'm just going to spiral into my own frustration and despair and everything else that we feel, right? When we feel like we've lost control, which we never had control, right?
Do you feel like these plants show up at certain times in our lives when we're ready for them or when we most need them?
I do think that, but I think they've probably been showing up all along, and we just weren't paying attention. So I think maybe they've been showing up, but we finally recognize them when we're ready. Or sometimes when we're at our absolute worst, they show up. Or we recognize that they've been showing up, right? And sometimes it's when we're at our absolute best. And sometimes when it's just some mundane day and we have we can't even pinpoint as to why all of a sudden we're paying attention. But it's like walking down the same street every day. You walk past these plants every day, but it may be just one day you happen to look over when something's in bloom, or you get an aroma of a flower that is, because the wind's blowing just the right way. And so was that the right moment, or were you finally just slowed down enough to pay attention,
Is there a plant that you're working with right now?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, I work with a lot of plants, but let me think about one that I've been working with a little bit more than normal. I've been moving so much. I've been in transit for months. So let me think what I've been working with. Well, it's kind of always been one of my favorites, but now it goes in everything. And we talked about citrus pill earlier, chin pea in Chinese medicine. I've kind of become, I don't want to say obsessed, but now whenever I eat a piece of fruit or a citrus, I have to dry the peel, because that's what you're using when you use chin pea, is you're using the citrus peel. So now citrus peel is like everything. It's in my congees. It's in my rice stock. It's in my soup. It's in my tea. It's in every single thing. It's like if I don't have chin pea in there, something feels off. And I think for me personally, it is a regulate chi herb, but it also kind of drains dampness or dries dampness in the body. And I've been having that like foggy thinking, and the what I've been telling my friends is like I've just been in the muck, and it's been really hard to like climb out of this like cloying substance. And I feel like citrus peel has been that like catalyst to, with my own dampness and my own like turbidity that's going on in my body, it's allowed me to like, see the sunrise again. I've really not been stuck in the negative, I don't want to say negative emotions, but the turbid emotions that have been going on. So chin pea has kind of been my smile bringer, and it really is helping me focus more and getting out of that brain fog as well. Because anytime we're clearing up dampness in our digestion, we're going to have, clearer thoughts, more positive thoughts, and also be able to like see our future a little bit more. Because I feel like, at least for me personally, and a lot of people I know, the direction got disjointed through, COVID and, everything else. I feel like we're all just kind of finding our way again. And chin pea has been really helpful for that.
Walk me through the process of how you're picking the orange, and then how you're drying it, and are you also eating it, it sounds like, or you're just steeping it?
So traditionally it was mandarin, and in Chinese medicine we use citrus pill in a few different forms, and sometimes it's the immature peel, and sometimes it's the mature peel, sometimes it's the green peel, so different ways.
What's that mean, the immature peel or the...
like when the fruit's really immature and still small.
Oh, okay.
Or as opposed to when it's like mature now.
And ripened.
When ripened, yeah. But I've been buying mandarin oranges, but you can use any citrus. Mandarin is, kind of one of my favorites because it's easy to peel.
Do you make sure to clean it real
Yeah,
good?
yeah. And I buy organic. If it is a non-organic mandarin, I don't dry it. Because studies have shown a lot of pesticide accumulation in the peels of non-organic mandarins, specifically from China. I haven't seen any on the U.S. grown fruit, but I can imagine it's the same.
In the peel, you can't really wash it off.
And you can't wash it off. But I would still wash off the peel, and then you peel it, you eat the orange. And then kind of depending on the month and how much I have, because you can buy the like big bags of mandarin. So I'll try to go through those pretty quickly. And then with my food dehydrator, I put it on for like 120 for, usually I start with 4 hours, and then every 4 hours I will turn it. And it might take 8 to 12 hours to fully be dry. And then I just stick it in a glass jar. If I just have a couple mandarins or a couple pieces of, or a couple oranges, I'll just air dry it in my house, which in Oklahoma, in the really humid times of year, that doesn't work very well. So then you bust out the food dehydrator. And I am eating it, especially if I make it into like a congee. It gets real soft, and I'll just cut it into small pieces as I'm eating my oatmeal, or I usually make congee with oats because I'm not a huge rice fan.
Oh, I'm not familiar with kanji.
Oh, congee is a great Chinese medicine food, and it is basically just slow cooked grains. So you can use oats, you can use rice, you can use buckwheat, you can use quinoa, you can use whatever grain you want. I tend to use oats though, and you're basically making a porridge or an oatmeal, but instead of like a 2-to-1, 2 parts water to 1 part grain, you do like 4, 5, 6 parts water. You slow cook it with the lid off so the water's evaporating. And then you're adding your herbs to the stock. So you get like a medicinal stock. And so then you eat the congee, and I'll eat the orange peels. I put jujube dates in there. I put cinnamon or ginger. I'll put hawthorn berries. You can pretty much put what in there. But if I do suggest putting the herbs in a muslin bag if you don't want to eat those herbs. Otherwise, you're going to be picking it out of the food. But with something like citrus peel, I'll eat it, no problem.
I used to dehydrate the microgreens before I then moved to freeze drying. And a number that a temperature I always dehydrated at was 110. My understanding is after 110, there's risk of burning off some of the good things.
In the microgreens in general, because they're so delicate?
I think in most plants.
Okay. With cannabis, if we're going to decarb it, it has to be at like 220.
That's to activate it.
That's to activate the THC, exactly. And I've been concerned about that with the terpenes because from an aromatherapist, that seemed like a really high temperature, but we haven't really seen it affect the terpene profile. So when I do my orange peels, they still smell extremely aromatic. But I don't know what it's doing to some of maybe the other constituents in it because I haven't looked into that.
Some other things might be more fragile than can handle some higher heats.
Yeah.
Like a vitamin C that's in an orange, that's a very fragile vitamin, and higher heat potentially could burn it off.
Yeah.
Just as a thought with you there. So you've got the mandarin. That's a strong plant ally to you right now. What are some of your other plant allies?
Milky oats is always a plant ally. Again, as you can tell, I really like oats. But I like milky oats. They always feel like a blanket. It always just feels so nurturing and comforting to me.
Did you grow up with them?
I do have like Western European ancestry, so I can only imagine it's in there. I grew up eating instant oatmeal. I didn't grow up eating the oatmeal that I'm eating today,
Same.
But I've always loved it. I am also, hawthorn berry is always in there for me. Hawthorn in general, hawthorn leaf and flower. That's a big plant for me always because I do tend to... I will go to the negative side given too much push. So that one really does, again, it keeps me in that heart space because I can easily get out of that.
Are these as teas?
Yeah, usually teas. I do take tinctures though, but I like to drink teas. But tinctures are easy if you're not going to get it any other way. One of my biggest allies, because of the age group I'm in right now, is Schisandra berry, wuweiza. It's a 5-flavor seed. It's really good for endurance and stamina, but also for those like perimenopausal problems of like Like I've always been a great sleeper, but now I notice my sleep. I'm a much more lighter sleeper than I've ever been before. So it can help with that kind of insomnia that I don't really consider insomnia, but the lighter sleeping and hot flashes, night sweats, which thankfully I'm not really getting, but I'm trying to prevent getting those by using Schizandra berry. So that one's a big one, and then rose. I actually take a Schizandra berry rose combo tincture that feels great. Reishi is one of my dailies.
Is that the number one plant in Chinese medicine? If there was like a hierarchy?
I don't think it's a number one plant, but it is in our tonified qi category, which if we kind of want to put a Western word on that, we would say it was one of our adaptogens. So it is one of those plants that can be taken in small doses for a long period of time. So it is highly revered as being like a longevity tonic. But in Chinese medicine, it really depends on what practitioner you go to and what region they studied from to say what their like top plants are, But if I had to talk about top plants, astragalus, ginseng, reishi, I feel like is really popular. But I feel like my Western trained practitioner friends, which I am also a Western trained herbalist, we gravitate towards reishi more than my Chinese medicine, like from China teachers do. Like it's in there and it's a really important herb, but I feel like us Western herbalists have really gravitated to that one as one of our top herbs, probably because I feel like we need it more. Culturally, we didn't grow up with Taoism as the foundation of our culture. And so maybe we need it more, and that's why we're more attracted to it. I don't know.
What do you think of ginseng being grown in the U.S. or any of these Chinese herbs being grown in the U.S.?
Yeah, I think it's super important for us to grow Chinese herbs here. That way they don't, well, we know, what chemicals are being sprayed on them and what the water supply is like that they're being grown with. All of those things I think are important. A lot of my professors would say it's not going to be as effective if it's not grown in specific regions of China. I haven't
Like
seen
these
that.
old growth, like forests or fields or...
Well, a lot of things are being mass farmed like they are here. Some of those herbs, like the old growth forest herbs, have been gone for a long time.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's just
Or they're so highly expensive that normal people aren't buying them. So a lot of what we're getting from China is farmed anyway. So it's farmed here, it's farmed there. So I think it's important. I think it's the future of practicing or taking Chinese herbs in the U.S. is I think we need to grow more of them here.
I get a ginseng tea from Wisconsin. Apparently Wisconsin's there's a company out there, I'm forgetting the name of it, but that's who I sometimes buy my hemp flour from, and they're also a ginseng farm.
Yeah, because American ginseng, we have our own ginseng that grows here. And for hundreds of years, we've been buying Chinese ginseng from them. They've been buying American ginseng from us. Up until like the 90s, I think most of our ginseng that was, wildly grown here in the United States was being exported to China. Americans weren't taking American ginseng, but people in China were taking it. So that's where most of our ginseng was going.
It feels energizing to me. I
It's
like the
so
taste.
energizing.
I put some honey in. I brought some today. I drink it most days. I try to only drink loose leaf tea. Tea bags, there's different thoughts on them, but you get some plastics and some chemical leaching.
And it's floor sweepings. That's what my
Yeah.
teachers always told me.
It's the lowest
tea
quality.
is, well, and literally it could be the duff that was being swept off the floor,
Yeah, I sell tea today, and loose leaf tea, maybe it might be a little bit more expensive, but you can typically get 2-3 good steeps out of it as well. So you could re-steep it, reuse it, you get more life out of it. I wanted to give you a gift. I have a company called Be Micro where we do freeze-dried microgreens, and I brought you a broccoli powder. It's USDA organic and regenerative organic, all grown here in the U.S. And I wonder, what is your what would Chinese medicine think of microgreens, or how do you think about microgreens?
How I think about microgreens is kind of like concentrated yang energy, right? Because like you said, when it's like 10 to 14 days old, it's what I said, its highest nutrient value. And in Chinese medicine, little kids or like babies have this like yang energy. And then as we grow older, the yang energy decreases. So that's how I think about microgreens is you are getting like this super high energy package in the young green.
That's what yang means?
Well, yang is like the motive force that will drive change, right? Whereas yin is like a denser substance that things more like collect in, right? Just as a very generic way of saying it. So
I thought yin was more like feminine and yang was more like masculine, but I'm clearly...
that it has been misconstrued that way. But if we look at the Chinese character for yin and yang, yin is the shaded side of the mountain, and yang is the sunny side of the mountain. So it's really showing you, again, there's always dynamic change of forces in Chinese medicine. So yang energy is like summertime. We are at the peak of yang energy, right? Sun's out for a long period of time. People have more energy, where there's more outwardly expression in nature, right? Things are blooming. There's fruits, vegetables, all of those things are at their peak performance. Whereas yin energy is going inward. The ultimate yin is wintertime, especially some place like Colorado, where we actually see everything go into hibernation and go internal and get cold and slow down. That's yin. So yang energy would be microgreens, right? In Chinese medicine, if they're using greens at all, which they're, of course, there's bok choy and cabbage and things like that, they are cooked for a very long period of time. So in our perspective, a lot of the nutrients would be leached out of that, but it's in the water. So you cook with the water that all of these things are in now. And it's not at a high temperature, so hopefully things aren't being killed off. But Chinese medicine's not really into eating cold foods or raw foods because it slows down digestion, and our vital life force energy comes from the health of our digestion. So I've never heard anything about microgreens at all in terms of Chinese medicine perspective.
I'm looking to compete more with athletic greens. There are 100 different ingredients. They're like the mega greens powder company out there. From your formulating perspective, I have this broccoli version, and then I also have a version that's red cabbage, broccoli, and radish. They're all of the cruciferous family. The main benefit is they're very detoxifying, and we've lab tests for those ways. But then it's also a really easy way to sneak in more vegetables. A lot of people are just not eating vegetables, and so just a half a teaspoon is equal to 1 to 2 whole cups of leafy greens. So you only need a very small amount.
That's great.
From your formulating perspective, what other products or ingredients might you add in to say there's already these microgreens? What else might you put in there to kind of round it out to compete with athletic greens?
One, I think it sucks that you think you have to compete with A1, right? Or athletic greens, whatever it's called now.
Now AG1.
AG1, AG1, right. Because I used to take the athletic greens several years ago before they shortened the name. But I never paid for it. I got a bunch of free samples, and I was like, I did feel energized from that. As somebody who doesn't like taking things with a bunch of ingredients, I found it's overkill. So many of those supplement companies, it's overkill. You're going to pee out so much of that. Harder to work on your kidneys, harder for your liver, and we don't need that. We don't need it. But we've been convinced we need this subscription model where we buy these things that have 80 ingredients in it. And
100 for them.
and I just don't think it's true. It's like you're confusing the body, first of all, and you're not utilizing so much of it that you're wasting precious material that then somebody's kidneys are just going to pee out, right? Because we can't uptake that much of a lot of these ingredients. Okay, so there's that. And I just think the supplement market in general, so much of it is BS and unnecessary, and it's just some influencer trying to make a bunch of money off you. Something like this that's food is completely different. So I feel like you're almost in two different categories because they're in supplement and you're in food.
We have a supplement version as well. We have supplements, we have the food, we have capsules. We're trying to. What is the delivery method that people want the most?
Right, because people's delivery method changes. I don't swallow pills. So a powder or a liquid is like my go-to. But in terms of what you could add is nettle. Nettle would be great in there because it's super high in a bunch of micronutrients. It's high in calcium and iron. It's kind of a weed. It grows everywhere. Most of the nettle we get for the herb market, though, does come from like Croatia. But nettle is something that can be grown most places of the United States. And once it's established, it will take over. So nettle's a great option. You could also add in hawthorn berry or jujube dates or some, fruit in there if you did want to give it, some more a sweeter flavor if you feel like that's something that would be attractive to people. There was one other thing. Nettles. If you were going to try to like formulate for where people live, people like here in Colorado could really benefit from like marshmallow root because it is such a dry environment. So maybe adding something like mucilaginous to it would help that dryness that happens to us here in Colorado. But just as a basic, nettle, yellow dock, dandelion, dandelion, yellow dock, and nettle are all things that we would put in like an iron blend if we were going to make a blend for somebody who may think that their iron stores are low. So all three of those would be great in there, and they're herbs. So then you can say, like Chinese medicine, we're really into eating our medicine. Food is medicine. So then adding those few herbs in there could, I think, be beneficial. They do taste pretty bitter, so you would want to think about that. But you could also harvest them when they're really small, and then they would be less bitter.
Thinking of just efficacious doses, a dose that you're getting enough of that herb for it to give you the intended benefit. Any thoughts on that around AG1? 100 ingredients, you're saying, some we can't even absorb all of this. And I wonder, I've never tried AG1, I should, how big of a scoop it is and all of that. Do you think, and there's many greens powders doing the same thing as AG1, I would be less ingredients and try to be all U.S. grown, but is there a part where it's like, hey, this is just marketing and we're just saying that there's, we're putting turmeric in there, but it's just a sprinkling it's called pixie dusting in the space?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've never heard that term, but I love it. There's definitely a lot of pixie dusting going on there. I haven't looked at their formulation in years. I mean, ever since I got the free samples. So I can't exactly remember what's in there, but I'm going to guarantee you based on, it was like a little packet and it was maybe a tablespoon, that there probably wasn't enough in a lot of the ingredients to actually be effective.
Any mushrooms coming to mind for this, or do you think it doesn't need it?
We always need mushrooms, I don't know how it would taste adding the mushrooms in there, but I'm a big fan of lion's mane. I'm a big fan of, oyster mushrooms, of course. Shiitake, I feel like has such a strong flavor. I might stay away from that one, just because shiitake can turn some people off on the flavor. I, as an herbalist, I do though tend to take my mushrooms separate from other things, and that might just be a personal preference. But when I do, like, I'm vibing out what I'm taking in the day. A lot of times, like, the mushrooms don't actually want to be like blended with the other things. I may take them like, okay, I'm going to take this tincture, and then I'll take my reishi tincture or whatever. But sometimes I'll take my tinctures and I just put them all dropper full into a little water and then shoot, like this much water. But so often the mushrooms don't actually want to go in that blend with everybody else. This probably sounds funny. But St. John's wort doesn't like to do that either. And I don't take St. John's wort all the time. But when I do take it, it's always like, no, don't mix me with these other things. I'm a standalone right now. So again, might just be, but it's the information that I'm getting. And there's no reason for me to want, like, psychologically for me to be like, keep these separate. So I can only imagine the information is coming from them.
I want to do a little, in our kind of final quarter time together here, I want to do a little rapid fire lightning round with you. So I'm going to name some different plants, and I want you to just give me either personify that plant or give me an image or a vibe or an energy, or just put a couple words to the plant, whatever comes up for you.
Okay.
You down for that?
Yeah, I'm down.
All right, cool. Cannabis or ganja.
Oh, ganja, man, that is like healing of the nations. That is the plant that I think if we would all take or appreciate, there would be more unity. If we would just, we all just need to get stoned together.
That sounds great. Hemp.
Hemp is vitality, versatility, and reverence. Because I think if we took the money out of it, hemp would be playing a bigger role in what is going on today. Whereas CBD played the big role and hemp got forgotten because CBD was the money maker. So I think hemp is longevity, versatility, and, if we truly cared about what we're doing with the planet, there would be more hemp.
And then if any of these have paint a picture, if the inspiration shows up to personify any of these as well.
I rarely personify plants, but I'll try. I'll try.
Could be fun if it shows up. Just if
Okay.
it drops in for you, that's interesting to me as well. Tobacco.
Tobacco is like, I think tobacco is considered negative, or not negative, masculine, but for me, it is like mama plant. If you have ever seen Nicotiana grow, it is the most beautiful flower. So for me, tobacco is just like sacred medicine that it was the epitome of exploitation, because we have exploited that plant to where we call it poison, But it's us that poisoned it. It was not the plant, right? So
By mixing so many other ingredients in with it and selling them as cigarettes.
well, right, and just the whole how the United States became a world power through slavery and tobacco plantations, and it is just exploitation at its worst for such a plant that is sacred,
Psilocybin.
Psilocybin is, I can't even say psilocybin without laughing, but our psilocybin mushrooms are clarity of vision, clear thinking, expansiveness if we can look past just being high, right? If we can actually go in there and be like, what insights of time travel is this plant going to tell us if we only listen? So I guess maybe time travel is going to be my new answer.
Magnolia.
Oh, magnolia is pure love. Magnolia is pure love.
Pine.
Oh, man. Pine is acceptance, and pine is love yourself, stand tall in your own beliefs and your own convictions, or or the whole forest falls.
And you might help me with the pronunciation of this. Podarco?
Oh, pau d'arco.
Say again?
Pau d'arco.
Pau d'arco.
Yeah, that is a beautiful South American plant. When I think about that plant, man, that one is, I'm going to grab you. I'm going to get you. That's the one that's like, because it has these like great little cat's claw. It's called cat's claw. Also, it's got these little things that are just like, I'm going to stick into you until you actually listen to what I'm going to say. So, because you know how those cat's claws are, they'll like push it out, and sometimes it's like this nice, like gentle, and then sometimes it's like, are you paying attention to me?
That's your most viewed video on YouTube.
I
People
know, which is random.
Oh, is it? Okay.
I
I'd
mean-
never heard of it before, but people want to hear you talk about it.
I've also noticed that is my most watched video on YouTube, and I don't know how that one started trending or whatever, because it's actually not a very commonly used herb in Western herbalism. In South America, it's used as like an anti-parasitic herb, and also for, and then in the Western herbal world, we have, adopted it as one of our herbs to support cancer treatment. So, people will call it like anti-cancer, or as an herbalist and acupuncturist, I'm not legally allowed to make claims that they heal specific diseases, but it is used for people who have cancer to help promote health. We'll say that.
And in your YouTube video, you also share how it's cooling,
Yes.
and cancer is typically more of like a heating.
Yeah, it's cancer is like a dew toxin or a fire toxin. So it is definitely cooling to the body, and can, in some studies, it does show tumor reduction from pau d'arco.
Reishi.
Oh, reishi is spirit medicine. Ganoderma lucidum, right? So lucid dreams, lucid thinking. Reishi to me is whenever I am feeling the most out of sorts, reishi and rose, and that is one that reishi does like to go with. Reishi does like to go with rose.
And in what way will you consume that?
Usually in a tincture or a very mild tea, because when you decoct reishi, it gets super, super bitter. But sometimes I'll just do like a simple steep and then put some roses in there and steep those together.
Can you shout out any brands that you like to get any of this from?
Reishi, I would typically get from Mayway Herbs, but you have to be a practitioner to order from them. You can get it from Mountain Rose, though Mountain Rose has great reishi. And then across the United States, we have, in a lot of different regions, we have local reishi. So you can also just harvest from the trees in your yard. If you happen to have reishi growing, or Ganoderma species. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same species. And then Host Defense. I love Paul Stamets. So I really am a big proponent of his products through Host Defense.
Oh, okay. So his reishi. And what about for rose?
Rose, if you know the source, I say pick your own rose petals. But Mountain Rose, I also do get organic rose petals from them.
So all the roses on my yard are blooming right now. What might I do to try and collect some of those? And
well, first of all, approach with reverence and a gift always, which I know you will do. And then you can just lightly, you can pick a whole bud and dry it that way, or you can individually pick the petals. And those I would just air dry. I would not put in a dehydrator or anything. And then you would just let those dry and then store them in a nice airtight glass container. And then, you could use a teaspoon or a tablespoon per cup of tea.
how long do you think the air drying takes here in Colorado?
Oh, gosh. At this time of year, probably 24 hours.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I bet it would happen really quickly, especially if you were able to flip them throughout the day. I bet it would only take a day or two.
And does it need to be in the sun?
I would try to leave it out of the sun.
Okay.
It could be like in a well-lit room, but not like right under the
Direct.
window.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nettle.
Oh, nettle is pay attention.
And for those listening, I'm pulling a lot of these from your book. You have a chapter on most of these.
Yeah.
Rose.
Rose is.
Maybe we already said it.
Yeah, rose is just pure heart. It is pure heart.
Do you ever do any agua florida sprays?
Oh, sometimes I do. Yeah, I definitely.
I love rose for that.
Yeah.
It's very cleansing, clearing, heart opening. I like to collect forage plants from around and put them into an alcohol, like a whiskey or a vodka, and then seal that up and make my own. And then I'll sip a little bit, usually to commemorate a moment. Like me and my girlfriend were just out west, and we gathered a bunch of plants along the way, and that's like for her birthday. We made that, and then but then you could also spray that instead of smudging like smoke. You can spray that around, but you can sip a little. You can put some in your hands and smell it, and just it's a really nice way to pray and clean a space.
Well, and you made a tincture
Oh,
because
okay.
you infused herbs into alcohol. So you could also take it internally as the tincture as well.
Yeah, I like taking like a little sip of it, and then just being in a prayerful way with it is really nice. And I've also been putting orange peel in all of it just intuitively, and I'm happy to hear about it.
Yep, you were on the vibe.
I was on the vibe. I was on the vibe. Basil.
Ooh, basil. Basil to me is ancestral food. Almost, whether you're having, holy basil because you're from, India or Nepal, or our Western European basil that is now grown all over here. To me, basil is just, it's like family and food.
And holy basil, also known as Tulsi, is that right?
Tulsi, yes.
Redwood.
Redwood is deep, deep roots. Like if we want to remember where we come from, go sit in a redwood grove.
Angelica.
Angelica is, I'm not really into angel medicine per se. It's not my vibe, but it is angel medicine. It is that, like, if we want that answers from the divine or from the beyond, that is Angelica for me.
And are you doing that as a tincture and a tea?
I usually will, Angelica sinensis, which is a Chinese herb, dong quai or dong guai, I will take that internally. And they actually have like 3 different Angelicas they use, unrelated to Angelica archangelica, which was the one that is angel medicine for me. But I will burn the root and use it as like a ceremony for, like when I'm in meditation or when I am looking for an answer or asking for an answer, like, well, maybe if you have time, you can help me sort this one out. So
in a
that's
similar
how I use
way
it.
that people burn sage or Palo Santo.
Yeah, exactly. Or frankincense or myrrh, because you could powder it and add it with those 2 herbs as well. Yeah.
Hawthorn.
Hawthorn. I keep going back to heart medicine, but hawthorn is really, for me, is when I am breaking my own heart. Whereas rose is like your heart is breaking, right? From a breakup, a loss, hawthorn to me is when we need that deeper connection with ourselves, and rose is like helps that deeper connection with others.
Rosemary.
Oh, rosemary, invigorating, uplifting, movement, pure. It's like that yang energy when we need to clear something up so we can move forward.
Do you feel that people can just have these plants growing in their home as well and still receive some benefit from them in that way?
Yeah, I almost think you get more benefit from it when you're growing it than just mindlessly taking it, right? Mm-hmm. Because you're tending, right? You're tending to this plant.
You're in a real relationship with it.
You're in a real relationship, whereas a tincture is kind of like, I'm going to open this bottle, or a capsule is like, I'm going to open this bottle. It's mindless, right? Which sometimes we need mindless, so we can even attempt to be in this more intuitive or intentional space. So yeah, I think growing it, I'm always a huge proponent of growing it. Even if you're like, I don't want to take it, it's like, great, you don't have to take it, just grow it. And then maybe one day you will want to take it.
Mm-hmm. Sage.
Yeah. Sage is a breath. Like when I think about sage, I think about how I can like take a deep breath, whether that's garden sage or white sage or pineapple sage. It elicits deep breathing for me.
Do you ever mix any of these, or well, I guess you said that you do. I'm just thinking of in many indigenous cultures, they're rarely, if ever, taking these medicines on their own. They're only mixing. Like I've sat with some Navajo medicine men, and a common tea is pine or pinon because they're in New Mexico, but our pine, sage, and cedar or our juniper. And they would never have any of them separately, but together, that's they always do. I think at least three different herbs together.
And Chinese medicine is the same way. Rarely are you taking simples. With something like ginseng, that's a simple, but rarely, it's usually in formulation, so very similar to that. I will take things by themselves, but more often than not, I'm formulating. But there's some times where, and I think if you're new to herbalism or to plant medicine, it might be beneficial to try one at a time. So you can understand the energy of that plant, and then you add another, then you take, maybe there's 5 different plants. You take them all individually first to get their nuances and, how they flow, and then add them together and see how that feels. Or add 2 together or add 3 together.
Any of these plants that you'd like to go a little bit deeper in on?
Let's see. I mean, we could go into, sage just in the sense of, culturally appropriating people's belief systems. I am a believer that with respect and reverence, no plant should be off limit to anyone, regardless of who you are or what culture you come from or your belief system or your background. But I also think it's important, like for me, like I love white sage. I stopped buying white sage 10 plus years ago. One, just because if you've ever tried to put sage out, it's so hard. And I was like, I've burnt a couple of things because the sage never goes out, without water or sand. But my friends were growing it. So they just started giving it to me. And so I started using it differently than a sage bundle, but that I would like buy at a market. I was just using loose sage.
Do you ever just take fresh? What I'll do is I've got a lot of garden sage growing around me. I'll offer it some water. I'll pick off just the top of it, and then I'll just hold it in my gums. And then I'll just be with it for, several hours.
Yeah. No, I've never done that in particular, but I definitely will because I also have garden sage growing. So for me, I've been more attracted to garden sage than white sage. One, because I don't grow white sage. If I grew it, I would probably have more of an affinity to that now. But I'm also using different plants as my aromatic medicine. So I don't rely as heavily on the white sage because we do have so many more aromatic plants that we can have. And then, so I've been using garden sage more because that's what I have around me, So, but I do want to just say that like white sage is being over harvested for commercial use so people can burn it as smudge, and maybe growing your own garden sage or your own white sage or whatever sage you do like the most, to then use that as your aromatic medicine or your spirit medicine, as opposed to because you saw it on the internet and it said white sage, that you go buy a cheap bundle from a tchotchke store and maybe that's your introduction and it's beautiful and it has profound effects, but maybe not the best choice for the sustainability of a plant that we do want to be available for generations to come.
Yeah, I didn't realize that it was being over harvested.
Yep.
So,
Like
so
so many of our plants are, as we know, you know.
what do you think about invasive plants?
You know, it's funny. Chip, my husband, has a great a saying about invasive plants, and that is, well, humans are invasive too, and we shouldn't tell people they don't belong here. So he's like, once a plant is here and it's been naturalized, is it really an invasive plant anymore, or is it just because we don't see the use for it? We're both from the South, and kudzu is everywhere, and it's taken over everything. And it's like here, and they spray poison on everything to get rid of the kudzu. Well, kudzu is an Asian herb that we use, and sure, it's a spreader, but sometimes plants are spreading to get your attention because maybe we could be utilizing this medicine. So instead of killing off the kudzu of the South, maybe we could be digging up the roots and using the whole plant or the parts of the plant as medicine as opposed to just calling it an invasive plant. Honeysuckle. We all like honeysuckle is one of the most delicious nectar plants. It smells so delicious. It's so divine. It's great for clearing heat from the body. It's considered an invasive plant in the South because it goes everywhere. But every kid has a honeysuckle memory. So if we would have killed off all the honeysuckle because it's invasive, you know, what would our childhoods in the summer South, you know, the South in the summer be like without honeysuckle? So,
What do you think about invasive animals like the boar?
again, I think anytime there's that, I mean, the most invasive species to me is humanity. So I'll just preface that with there's my opinion on humans. If anybody's invasive, it's us. But boars, I think anytime there's an animal like that that gets out of control, it's telling you something about the greater ecosystem. And there's an imbalance somewhere else for this animal to be able to breed. I mean, one, we know they can have like so many piglets, so it's kind of hard. But I think it's just a greater example of things being out of balance in the ecosystem.
What do you think about a business that focuses on invasive either plants or animals for their ingredients?
In terms of plants, as long as they're not sprayed, you know, with chemicals to kill off, you know, because they are invasive, I think it's a great idea. Anything that is in overabundance is what we should be utilizing instead of the things that are rare or take several years to get to potency. So, like with ginseng, they would never harvest it anything younger than a 3-year root. But really, you would want 6 years or 9 years. You would want a very old root. But because American ginseng, you know, that show Ginseng Hunters is killing. I mean, we already had over-harvested American ginseng, and then that show came. Everyone started harvesting ginseng, and they're harvesting first-year roots. The medicine's not in the first-year root. But because people want to sell it and they're uneducated about it, they're harvesting roots that aren't even potent yet. And then they've killed off that plant because once you take the root, it's gone, right? So,
Well, that was almost 2.5 hours.
oh my God.
That was really easy and fun.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you'd like to share, a message that you'd like to put out there, or any closing words before we learn about where we can connect more with you?
You know, I guess my words are like kind of just back to the beginning of the conversation where it is very easy to have a relationship with your surroundings, with nature, whether it's like you live in an apartment building and it's the tree that's outside the lobby door, whatever it is, just take a few moments. And even if you don't know how to meditate or that seems foreign to you or it just seems too hard, it's really 3 breaths. And every day, just going back to that and spending 3 breaths and taking that moment, not only for yourself, but just to notice what's happening with the plants around you. And then maybe it'll cultivate a deeper relationship, or maybe it'll just make you feel better for, 15 to 30 seconds out of the day.
And how do you think about those 3 breaths? Is it 6 seconds in, 6 seconds?
No rules. I'm not a rule follower. I don't think there should be any rule for how people should breathe with themselves or with the plants, except for make it a full breath. And notice if you're even able to take a full breath, and notice where it comes from. Is it coming from the chest? Is it coming from the abdomen? Does it get caught in your throat? What are you thinking about when that hesitation of breath does happen? Was it fear? Was it anger? Was it sadness? Was it you just thought about the grocery list you had to do later today,
Thank you. Where can people learn more about your work, find your book, and just learn more what you got going on?
Yeah, you can always check out my website, bakerbotanica.com. I have a podcast that I haven't recorded in quite a while, but you can always listen to the episodes of The Herb Walk with Jessica Baker, and it's on all podcast streaming. You can find my book. Unfortunately, right now it's just on Amazon, or you can go to Balboa Press and get it from Balboa Press. It's not. It does take a while to get to you, but it will show up. And I am doing a Chinese medicine clinical apprenticeship starting in September here in Colorado. That's going to run September of 25 to May of 26. So you can always find that on my website. And I'm doing a medical Qigong series for clinicians. So to help clinicians ground themselves, and also once they are comfortable doing the exercises themselves, then that's something that they can recommend to their clients. So that is also starting here in Colorado in September and goes through May. 1 weekend a month, one Sunday a month, and the apprenticeship is 1 weekend a month. So,
And all this can be found on your website?
All of it can be found at bakerbotanica.com. I am on Instagram. Not as much social media as probably most people, but that's Jessica Baker _herbalist.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Stephen.
See you, everybody.